lengths to promote trade in Somalia. We are determined across the UK government to build on the progress that has been made. Somalia is changing. Over the last 2 years, security has dramatically improved, the political climate has opened up, and just 2 weeks ago, the Foreign Secretary reopened the British Embassy in Mogadishu, which was last evacuated 22 years ago. This was the Foreign Secretary's second visit to Mogadishu in just over a year. Before that, the last time a British Foreign Secretary visited Mogadishu was in 1992. And both the Secretary of State and myself visited last October, and we had a very successful visit and enjoyed our time in Mogadishu. But the very fact that we've been able to visit and that the Foreign Secretary could raise the British flag on the UK's new diplomatic premises in Somalia is a major step forward. And with those changes has come a renewed sense of confidence and optimism about the future of Somalia. And this is most visible in the reconstruction taking place in Mogadishu. One of the surest signs of improvements and progress has been the return of the Somali diaspora, many of whom have gone back for the first time in decades to set up businesses. The Somali talent for entrepreneurship remains as strong as ever and demonstrates the genuine appetite that exists among the Somali people for peace and prosperity. It is Somali traders who are showing the world a new side of Somalia, one that is moving away from the old stereotypes of terrorism, piracy, famine and war, and showing that given a chance, the Somali people can use their creativity, innovation, industry, resilience and entrepreneurial flair for the good of their country. Now, the changes that have taken place in Somalia over the last 2 years owe themselves primarily to the people of Somalia. After more than 20 years of war, there is a palpable thirst for peace, but we should acknowledge that big challenges remain. But the foundations have been laid for a new and positive chapter in Somalia's history. And the United Kingdom Prime Minister, David Cameron, has made it his personal ambition to support Somalia as it seeks to get back on its feet. That is why he hosted a conference yesterday on Somalia, at which over 50 countries were represented, as well as key multilateral organisations, assembled how they could best support the federal government of Somalia's plans to restore and enhance stability in the country. And that meeting was just the warm-up. Ultimately, only Somalis, under the guidance of the President and his government, can resolve their own differences and create conditions for peace and security. But in a country where the state has systematically been destroyed over the years, the private sector is going to have a huge role to play in the reconstruction process. And already the business opportunities are beginning to emerge. The fact that senior executives from over 70 major British companies should decide to come here today, as well as significant figures from the diaspora, show the potential market that exists in Somalia. And together, I hope we can facilitate that process. Throughout today, you will hear perspectives on the business potential from senior government figures, as well as case studies from practitioners who have already successfully invested. And you will also hear an honest assessment of the operational challenges of doing business in Somalia and how they can be overcome. The British government's support for Somali trade and investment goes hand in hand with our support for international financial institution re-engagement, which is a priority for the UK's presidency of the G8. IFI re-engagement in Somalia will bring support for long-term economic stability and growth, as well as large-scale funding over the long term. Combined with an improvement in Somalia's political and security environment, IFI support will help promote a stable business environment and long-term growth across the country. All these factors are essential for both opening up business opportunities and attracting foreign investment. For both agendas, visible confidence and optimism in Somalia's economic growth are key, and will send an important message to Somali and non-Somali investors alike of the opportunities for foreign investment in Somalia. But I think it's only right that I confirm to you, as you will suspect, that an event like this is the work of many people. And I would just like to take this opportunity to reiterate my personal thanks and that of the UK government to all of President Hassan Sheikh Mohammed's team and his government for all the work that they have put into this particular conference today. Also, the Secretary of State for International Development and her team for the significant efforts and co-chairing of this important event. But also some other disparate organisations, the Somali Economic Forum, Deloitte, Kayad Somali Arts and Culture, and the Worldwide Somali Students and Professionals. But I would like to say a particular thank you to the Horn of Africa Business Association, who have been instrumental in shaping this event. And I am proud that we have partnered these organisations to make today the success that I fully believe it is going to be. And of course, importantly, I would like to thank you all for being here and sparing the time to come today. And I think you are sending a significant message both to the Somali people and the Somali diaspora that you have confidence in the future of Somalia as well. And I very much hope and look forward to the contributions that you're going to make to this debate and for generating trade in Somalia, including what the Somali government, with the support of the international community, can do to help inward investment. I think it's also key to say that it's important that this is not just a one-off, that this dialogue continues. So there will be important networking opportunities, not just over lunch, but in the future as well. And I hope there will be a significant future database of companies interested in not just in investing, but staying in touch after today's event. And if you would like to have your details circulated to others who are here and others who are interested in investing in Somalia, please put your business card in the bowl on the front desk, and we will send around a spreadsheet after the event of names, organisations and email addresses. But you perhaps won't be surprised to hear in the world that we now live in that I'm duty-bound for data protection reasons to tell you that if you don't want your details circulated, don't put your business card in the bowl. Now, that's enough from me, but what I would urge you all to do is to play a very significant, positive and dynamic role in deepening the economic and trade ties between the United Kingdom and Somalia, both to assist with Somali economic development, economic growth and sustainable job creation, as well as assisting with our own UK economic recovery. I'm now delighted to introduce and extend a very warm welcome to Justin Greening, my colleague, the Secretary of State for International Development, who played an extremely key role in yesterday's conference, and I know is enthusiastic and determined to make sure that in creating economic development and poverty alleviation through, amongst other things, the assets that the private sector can bring. Justin.
Thank you very much, Mark. I never thought I'd hear a joke about red tape regulation, but we just had it. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be able to be part of opening up this conference today. I think it's an incredibly important conference, and it also comes after an important day yesterday, which saw the Prime Minister host a major international conference on Somalia with the President of Somalia, and it was truly inspiring to see over 50 international coming together to support the federal government of Somalia in its efforts to heal and to rebuild after 20 years of conflict. And I think that yesterday's conference really focused on finding ways for the international community to really help Somalia in now implementing its plans for improving their security and governance of that country. And in particular, the conference was designed to enable Somalia to develop their armed forces, reform the police force, improve the justice system, reduce corruption, and of course, critically, take steps forward on improving public finance management. Helping Somalia to get back on its feet is obviously going to be a long-term project. And I think nobody approaches that task lightly. There are still many major challenges, and Somalia will continue to need the support of its friends and its neighbours for some time to come. But a number of important things are changing now. There is a new parliament, chosen by Somalia's clan leaders in the most representative process there's been in decades. There's a new government with a coherent vision for the future. And the militant organisation Al-Shabaab has been expelled from over a dozen towns and cities across south-central Somalia. Given Somalia's recent history, it might surprise some of you to see the British government promoting Somali business opportunities. But one of the most encouraging developments of recent years has been how the Somali people themselves have taken advantage of the new relative levels of security to start rebuilding their own lives. And business has been at the forefront of this renaissance. Mogadishu in particular is now alive with the sound of people refurbishing their businesses and their shops. This is really great news because it's only through investment, trade and jobs that Somalia's dependence on aid will ultimately be able to end. Simply put, jobs help people lift themselves out of poverty for good. And if you need investment and trade, for jobs and for growth. And it's economic growth ultimately that defeats poverty in the long term. The facts are really compelling. Wherever long-term per capita growth has been higher than 3%, we've also seen significant falls in poverty. If you look at a country like Vietnam, a threefold increase in per capita GDP resulted in poverty levels coming from 64% in 1993 to 17% in 2008. So we know that economic growth is the key to unlocking poverty reduction. And jobs are even more important for countries that are emerging from conflict. We know that economic factors play a central role in both starting and maintaining conflict, but they can also play a key role in reducing conflict too. And in the short term, people are now starting to see a peace dividend in Somalia, and that in itself improves the likelihood that the peace will hold. Immediate tangible benefits of peace. And economic opportunities are playing a key part of this. We know that the Somali population itself is very young and has currently high levels of unemployment, with 73% of Somalis living on less than $2 a day. So inclusive growth can help raise income levels and create jobs, giving young Somalis the economic security and a stake in not only their country's future but their own future. And we know that a job often provides an alternative to taking up arms. So that means that increased business in countries like Somalia can, if done in a conflict-sensitive way, not only create jobs, but in doing so, promote stability. And I believe that a vibrant private sector can play an even bigger role because it can also fill the gaps in the basic provision of services. Reaching the places that a government can often struggle to reach, and driving innovation as well, as we often see, to solve difficult problems. The private sector can also help rebuild the infrastructure that Somalia needs that's been destroyed by conflict, which the state needs to deliver. And in other words, a private sector is part of how we can help rebuild Somalia's state capacity. And that's not all, actually. An expanding private sector and development of a tax system, of course, is the core part of state building, because it increases the government revenues that we need to pay civil servant salaries and to deliver those basic services. It's an absolutely inextricable and symbiotic relationship. You literally cannot build a sustainable public sector without helping to build a private sector alongside it. Sustainable public sector services need a funding stream of tax receipts, and that means a thriving private sector. So, we need economic development and growth, and that has to always be the top priority for any country. Of course, in Somaliland has already made great strides to support the private sector. In the World Bank's Ease of Doing Business report for 2012, it actually came above the sub-Saharan African average on important issues, for example, such as construction permits, getting electricity, and registering property. And the Somali people, as you've heard, have a long-standing history of trade and a tradition of enterprise and innovation. One of the achievements of this entrepreneurialism is that in spite of everything, the Somali private sector has continued to grow over the last 20 years, often filling the gaps as the state had to retreat and overcoming those difficulties. It's invested in the financial sector, supported private schools, paid for security, to name just a few areas. And Somalis enjoy some of the cheapest mobile phone tariffs in the world and have access to mobile banking. But the private sector can deliver so much more with the right support and investment. Because sustainable growth and development requires improved rule of law, enforceable property and land rights, better regulations, reduced trade barriers, proper infrastructure, a functioning tax system, and increased transparency, all things that are critical, in particular the last one, which is even more important when it comes to managing natural resources and getting those benefits for the country who has the resources. So establishing security, law and order and strong public financial management are the necessary first steps to give the private sector the confidence to invest more. President Hassan Sheikh has rightly made these areas his top priorities. And as we've heard yesterday, progress is already being made. Investor confidence is growing, new opportunities for business are emerging across South and Central Somalia, Puntland and Somaliland, and at present it's largely being driven by the Somali diaspora, who've clearly a massively important role to play in supporting economic regeneration. But there are also opportunities for non-Somali investors who have not perhaps traditionally operated in the Somali market. And it's never too early for the private sector to become engaged in a dialogue about reform with the government and for those different stakeholders to work together to set out priorities for economic growth. Although it's going to take time, work can begin right now to improve the business environment by beginning to set down the right regulations governing business activities and the financial sector. And established business people, I believe, also have a responsibility to ensure that there is a level playing field for everyone and that new businesses aren't stifled by unfair, uncompetitive practices. And in this way, we can really start to see business and the private sector contributing to good governance in Somalia, limiting the opportunities for corruption and reinforcing good, sound public financial management. I think all of us here have a role to play in promoting that economic growth and stability in Somalia. I think we can all encourage domestic investment, supporting and improving the enabling environment, addressing issues like regulation, as I talked about, and I think we can all play a role in encouraging the right, responsible investment. As you've heard, international financial institutions such as the IMF and the World Bank have also their role to play in supporting the Somali government to formulate its own growth strategy and to develop its own macroeconomic environment. And it's the IMFs ultimately that can also provide this large-scale finance that is often necessary for the sort of infrastructure development that we need to see that can, in its own way, help reduce the high cost of doing business. I'm absolutely delighted that the African Development Bank and the World Bank themselves are already engaged on this agenda. The UK is also playing its role. We're providing nearly £18 million over 4 years for development investments in agriculture and livestock production that's going to hopefully stimulate economic growth. We're also working with government authorities to develop policies that will make it easier for both local people and foreign investors to start and run successful businesses in Somalia. The aim is to create the conditions that enable local markets to flourish and to encourage government authorities to work with business to create an enabling environment that actually encourages fair and good competition. And last year, the projects we did supported more than 15,000 Somali people to get into employment. 35% of those people, incidentally, were women, because investing in women and girls in particular
is a smart thing to do as well as being the right thing to do. We know that when a woman generates her own income, she reinvests around 90% of it in her family and in her community. So it is a double bonus for development. And our private sector programs that we've run have shown also that there are really innovative ways of getting goods to the market in Somalia that have a potential to really transform those communities that they reach. And we're also listening to the Somali government and indeed business about what they would find most helpful in unlocking those opportunities. It's time to see, I think, more donors helping to support private sector development in Somalia in a responsible way. And I think there is much, much more that the international community can and should do. If you look at other countries like Ethiopia, DFID has supported the Investment Climate Facility for Africa. We worked with the Ethiopia Revenue and Customs Authority to set up the first electronic filing of tax returns there. It now takes just 1 day to submit a tax application and payment, and in fact over 65% of Ethiopia's tax revenue is collected using this new service. There are clear opportunities that we can pursue with Somalia along similar lines. And the evidence suggests that at this point, it's actually foreign direct investment that can make the biggest difference to post-conflict economies. An investment, as I've said, doesn't just offer new capital on infrastructure development, it also creates employment and critically technical know-how. I think it will anchor a country in the global world and the global economy, and we know that it can help reduce the chance of conflict. So promoting trade at events like this, I think, is an encouragement to all of you, particularly investors who are in the audience, to get in there early. I think that in turn can help speed up the rate of regeneration, itself creating a virtuous circle of jobs and sustainable incomes for Somali people, which in turn can create more growth and more prosperity. DFID's developing a comprehensive and responsible strategy to work with businesses interested in responsible investment in developing countries, and we're reaching out to all businesses that think that they can make a difference in poor countries. We're taking a very ambitious approach because I believe that DFID can be a hub for knowledge sharing and advice, providing in-country support, particularly where projects have a clear development gain for the countries concerned. And I think that's especially important for countries like Somalia that are now successfully emerging from decades of conflict. As 28 top CEOs wrote in a joint letter to the Financial Times earlier in March, they say, and to quote them, "This isn't about corporate social responsibility. We know that developing countries will be major markets and important sources of supply in the future. In fact, many already are. Developing countries are becoming emerging economies, and emerging economies become the engines of future global growth and prosperity. Somalia has its role to play in those emerging economies of the future, I believe, and many investors are already knocking on the door with an eye to Somalia's potential and its rich natural resources. Again, what will be critical is transparency and fair negotiations, which I can't emphasise enough. And I commend the session that will be happening later on today on the importance of transparency for the extractive industry. We're also committed, CDC, which is our arm's length investment corporation, to invest in fragile states where we know that investment's most needed. And we're hoping to see CDC investing in Somalia when it can find the right opportunities. The diaspora can be another key source of foreign direct investment. Diaspora investors, of course, are well placed, possibly better than anyone else, to manage risks and understand those risks because of their access to local knowledge. They can be a vital source of skills, I believe, and indeed business contacts for Somalia in the region, the Gulf and the West. And they can bring this experience that they have of corporate governance and transparency, and are often the earliest investors. As well as extractives, we know that the opportunities for African agriculture are huge. Africa's agriculture business sector is now projected to treble to $1 trillion by 2030. But the UK also knows that investment in agriculture can be risky. Crops can fail due to too little rain, pests, or of course they can perish simply on their way to market because supply chains are weak. It's even more challenging in a country that is coming out of conflict. And to share that risk with the private sector, the UK supports the Africa Enterprise Challenge Fund. This is a $200 million investment fund in innovative agribusiness ideas that are commercially viable and have high returns in jobs and increased returns to smallholder farmers. It's supporting 6 companies now to grow their businesses in South Sudan and has recently announced that it will provide loans and grants to 9 businesses in Somalia. Thanks to the enterprise funds, these businesses will revitalise production and processing in Somalia. We know that there are so many more opportunities like that, whether it's mer production for exports to world markets, fish canning and manufacture of savoury snacks. We know that the opportunities are there for Somalia. The key is now to start tapping into them, unlocking them and helping them to take place. Trade and networks across the region are clearly finally also going to be critical for Somalia. Somalia would undoubtedly benefit from joining regional blocs, but even now the informal trade networks play a key role in the economic life of the region. And we know the ability of Somali informal cross-border traders to survive and to adapt to change. It's another indication of the versatility and the robustness of Somali traders. Gulf countries have played a long-term and important role as Somalia's major trading partner for sectors such as livestock, meat and sesame, and by sharing skills and by helping Somalia to import skilled personnel and certification standards. They've also had a really positive impact on Somalia's international trade. And Gulf countries have also played a leading role in supporting infrastructure development in many developing countries. To conclude then, today is a real opportunity, I think, for us all to come together to discuss the opportunities opening up across south-central Somalia, Puntland and Somaliland, but also in doing so to face up to some of the challenges and what it's going to take to be able to see us unlock those opportunities. In part, it's a celebration of what the private sector is already doing in Somalia, and it's a chance for new alliances and the widening of networks, as you've heard. Ultimately, I think if we have a good conference, today will be another step after yesterday, helping Somalia on its path towards prosperity, economic growth, and an end to aid dependency. I think we all have a role to play. That includes the private sector, and I think it's now time to get on with our conference, to hear the President and to make the most of the opportunities that we have. Thank you.
Justine, thank you very much indeed for that extremely uplifting speech, detailing a whole range of areas where DFID are assisting and thinking about how we can best assist economic development and economic growth in Somalia. And I also hope that it demonstrates that government departments do work together, not just in terms of supporting the priorities of the Somali government, but also helping UK businesses realise the opportunities that exists. It now falls to me, and it's a huge pleasure for me to introduce the President of Somalia, President Hassan Sheikh, who deserves significant praise and thanks for the huge progress that has been made in the last 9 months or so to provide hope and opportunity to the Somali people, and he deserves the full support of both the international community and the business community in his efforts. And I think it's a testament to both his personal skills and the skills of the foreign minister that the political and diplomatic skills to keep the whole international community on board and supportive of the direction of travel which he wants to take the country that he leads. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome President Hassan Sheikh to address us.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Bismillah. I think much has been said by the Secretary and the Minister about the investment opportunities and the potentiality of Somalia. I just would like to add few on what has already been said about the future of the investment and trade in Somalia. The perceptions and the reputation of Somalia has been that of a broken nation for so long now. It is entirely understandable that very few of you in this room would even have contemplated the thought of business in my country, Somalia, let alone the prospect of trade and investment conference like this to happen today in London. Let me describe to you a different scenario in the last few months. A new 50-room, 4-star hotel has been sprung in Mogadishu main streets for the first time, let me say, in 20 years. Bringing with the first coffee shop franchise from Nairobi, the main telecom companies, all of them as a backbone, with the Hawala companies, the backbone of employment opportunities for Somalia and greater service that become a lifeline for the Somali people in the past 2 decades. Hormuz is building now a new 6-story headquarters. There are now 5 proper petrol stations that are working in Mogadishu today at this international standard. A fish factory exports 1/4 of a ton of fresh fish to the Arab markets each day from Mogadishu alone. Even a restaurateur from London has set a chain of 3 restaurants in Mogadishu and 1 on our pristine beach 20 kilometers south of Mogadishu. And a proper shopping mall is under construction with over 200 units. There are even prospects that the old Coca-Cola factory is set to press back into life very, very soon. This may not sound much to you now, sitting here in fabulous London, but these are the first signs of Somalia's commercial spring. Mogadishu is slowly becoming an enormous building site with the sound of hammers replacing the sound of gunfire for the first time. Mogadishu is open for business and proper business is thriving. Not only Mogadishu, but other corners of Somalia like Puntland, Somaliland, all new businesses are now taking momentum. You should understand that before the civil war, Mogadishu was a truly contemporary city, one of Africa's most advanced and popular destinations with a multi-million-dollar tourism industry. Despite the collapse over the past 20 years, Somalis, among the most entrepreneurial and business-oriented people on this earth, have never lost their desire to return to a normality that many can remember, and you can all relate to it. Somalia needs to be rebuilt, by which I mean everything: power stations and the energy grid, roads and transport infrastructure, ports and airports, houses and apartments, irrigation infrastructure and sanitation, everything from the cranes in the port to the taps in the bathroom of every house is an opportunity. What's more particular about Somalia is that it is essentially a blank canvas. We don't want the 1980s development. We want 21st century development using the most advanced technology possible. If we are going to rebuild, we want to get ahead as early as possible. Economic revival really matters in Somalia. The government of Somalia is building the foundations, the legal foundations for a prospering business, especially the public and private partnership legal framework. Our new investment law is tabled to the parliament and discussions are going on it, and soon we are expecting that the Somali investment law and the Somali fishery law and the Somali petroleum and gas laws all are coming out of our parliament. That will prove how the Somali government is committed to prepare the ground for the upcoming business revival. For us, economic revival matters more than anything else. In parallel with our efforts to reform and stabilize our country, we must start the process of kick-starting our economy and creating jobs, and public-private partnership is the way forward. The government of Somalia cannot dream to rebuild the country without the investment and the technology and the know-how of the private business entities, both national and international. At the heart of the social instability are fully employed men and women. When the people of Somalia are gainfully employed in legitimate business and employment, they will propel the country forward and leave behind the quarrels and the troubles of the past. So it's now essential for us to start the process of attracting serious international business interest to support our economic growth, even as we continue our quest to restore full security and social normality. The government of Somalia has repeatedly indicated the effort it's going to put on stabilizing the country, putting the security as the top priority for the government engagement. A secure environment is a prerequisite for investment, for production and extractive industries to flourish. So it's now essential for us to start the process of attracting a human resources development. Somalia's major asset has always been its people. Somalia has a huge potential human resources, as over 70% of the potential workforce is under the age of 30. On the other hand, Somalia has an educated, multilingual population and a highly skilled migrant community from the West, which will be the backbone of our workforce in the future. The diaspora need not be large to generate a positive development impact. Even a small number of highly skilled expatriates can create enormous benefits, in particular in poor economies with severe shortage of skilled professionals. Nevertheless, the onus of mobilizing the diaspora and transferring specialized knowledge and technology should not be placed wholly on the diaspora. There are strong and dynamic local intellectuals emerging from the local universities and institutions. Somalia is located in a very strategic position in the world, which is an asset and important. The country is located in the eastern coast of the African continent known as the Horn of Africa and has the largest coastal line belt in the African continent. Architectural heritage and endless beautiful pristine beaches that will be great for tourism is in Somalia. Somalia is the eastern gateway to Africa, but we need to improve our port facility through which to maximize trade capacity in the future. The strategic importance of the Indian Ocean sea lanes, Somalia guards the southern edge of the world's busiest and most important trade routes through the Gulf of Aden. The security of the shipping and sea lanes of the communications in the Indian Ocean is an issue of major strategic concern. In the first instance, sea lanes security is important to the national economy of the Indian Ocean countries, specifically to their industrial markets. The Indian Ocean is furthermore a vital transit route between the Pacific region, Africa, and Europe, with vast cargo passing through the region, and Somalia has a potentiality to attract those routes. Somalia's competitive global trade hub. Before all of this, however, must come the regulatory and the legal framework, as I said earlier. We need this as a government to ensure that revenues are collected. You need it to ensure that there is a solid legal foundation under each industry and a clear roadmap for conducting business in the country soon. To that end, we are focused on bringing legislation to Parliament as quickly as possible so that it can be passed into a law and give us a legal basis through which to realize the full commercial capability of our nation. Diverse potential economic resources is there in Somalia. Somalia has undeveloped potential resources which we like to develop. It is a holistic approach with the help of our friendly countries that interested in trade and investment of Somalia, where UK is in the lead. The main sectors of prospect in Somalia are oil and gas and mining industry, agricultural sector, related industries. 8 million hectares equals 13% of the land of Somalia, arable land. Fishing sector and related industries, livestock sector and related industries, tourism sector, transportation and related industries, infrastructure and housing. All are opportunities that are opening now in Somalia. We need all international partners to be attracted into Somalia. What we need from UK trading partners, how can we attract the investment into Somalia, work together on that direction. Small and medium-sized business are critical. It's not just the big corporations. The nature of Somali business is more personal and fits the SME model very well at this initial stages. Let me conclude to this. Business and economic revival will be the engine that drives Somalia forwards. Industrial and commercial development is critical to the government's dream of providing effective services and governance. But it's also critical to our people. Jobs and livelihoods to be improved as early as possible. Training, skills, education. These are the things that transform lives and get our nation back to work. These are the things that free our people from poverty and the lot of extremism and piracy. Somalis are never happier than when they are trading. Our local companies have offered great opportunity for our people at the most difficult times of the recent history of Somalia. The telecommunication companies, the hawala and remittance industry, the skills of the local women who has been trading daily on the local markets, all are the backbone of the current Somali livelihoods and employment. And we are proud of them. The Somali government is specifically targeting them to be developed and empowered with the new technology and investment from the international corporations. I would like to conclude my word saying that Somalia is open for business right now. Thank you.